In addition to the laws that govern relationships between people and people, we also have several laws in Exodus and Leviticus that govern the relationship between people and God. And these ones get a little bit strange. So if you're going to live with Yahweh in your midst at the very center of your camp, then you're going to have to be really careful about your body. And we'll get a little bit more into that. But for instance, you can't have any seepage coming out of your body. So you can't have like an open wound in which blood is coming out or pus or anything like that. If you do, you can't go to the tabernacle. Also, the clothing that you wear has to be a certain type of clothing. So it matters what you wear when you're living with Yahweh in your midst. You can't wear clothing that's made of two different types of cloth. So your body matters, your clothing matters, and then finally your food matters. What you put into your body is actually important if you are going to have Yahweh live in your midst. You don't want to be eating anything that is yucky or creepy or weird. Then you've got this system, because Yahweh knows that if you're living with Yahweh in your midst, that you're probably going to foul up at some point, that maybe you will have an open wound, or maybe you'll mess up your clothing, or maybe you'll accidentally eat something that you're not supposed to. And so there's a sacrificial system. And for some reason, the shedding of the blood of an animal can act to bring everything back to the way that it's supposed to be. For some reason, the shedding of the blood that Leviticus says again and again, the life is in the blood. And so the pouring out of life somehow acts to restore life to everything. Because if you're living with, here's Yahweh, and then your camps are all around Yahweh, Yahweh is the source of life, right? Yahweh is in your midst, but you're out here in mundane land. And so even though Yahweh is permeating all that there is and coming out towards you, you are also kind of being moved towards death at the same time when you don't wear the right things or when you eat the wrong things. All of that is the mundane getting in there on you. And so somehow shedding blood of an animal brings life where the death is seeping in. And that restores purity. Also, you're going to need to orient not only your space around God, so Yahweh is in your midst and then you're camped all around Yahweh, but also you need to orient your time around God so that you have this continual refocusing on purity. And that's why we have Sabbath. And that's why the people of God are reminded every 7 days, hey, your focus needs to be on God, your purity needs to be right. That's also why we have the year of Jubilee. The year of Jubilee says every 50 years we need to set things back to the way that Yahweh intended them to be. And then we also have these feasts and different times when people remember, okay, our lives, even our time is oriented around God. So laws that govern relationship between people and God. Here we go. So we have to approach a God of order as people. This God is a God that ordered everything that there is. And so, like I said, all of that stuff in that BuzzFeed, tiles that are out of line can't come near God. But also, you can't come near God if you are wearing cloth made of two different kinds of thread. So any of you right now who are sitting there and you're like, but I'm wearing a poly cotton blend, what am I going to do? You're right, you can't go near God according to Leviticus. Also, you have to be really careful about what you eat. You can only eat animals that chew the cud and have a cloven hoof. Those are the two things. You have to have an animal that chews the cud and has a cloven. I never know if it's hoof or hoof, but I'll let you guys decide. And then finally, you can't have anything seeping out of your body. And so I had you read for this class Leviticus 15, and hopefully you did because it's really interesting. You can't go to the tabernacle if you're on your period. You can't go to the tabernacle if you've had a nocturnal emission, guys. So if you had a nocturnal emission. I'm just going to leave it at that. Anyway, you can't go near God if you have like gonorrhea and you're leaking. All of those things disqualify you from going near a God of order. So we have to ask this question: why are these laws so weird? Why does God want to tell us whether or not we can wear clothing made from two types of cloth? What is that all about? And what I'm going to suggest to you is that maybe, just maybe, these things that they came up with as far as the two types of cloth are perhaps more cultural than they are necessarily moral. And so they had in their mind a way, when you approach God, you need to be right. And we have some standards that are kind of similar to that. There are certain things when you wear them that they're just wrong. And those are culturally defined. So for the ancient Hebrew people, when you were wearing clothing made of two types of cloth, well, that was just wrong. So in a similar way, this guy, according to our modern culture, he's wearing a tie with a polo shirt. And that is just wrong. We don't behave that way. Also, you may or may not know this, but you're not supposed to wear white pants or shoes after Labor Day. It's just a no-no. You can't wear pastels. You shouldn't wear a light colored suit, all of that stuff, so, because the seasons are changing. So for example, if Melania Trump showed up, I'm going to have to edit this if I use this in the future. If Melania Trump showed up somewhere in December wearing a lavender pastel pantsuit, we would all just choke on our cereal, because you don't do that. So we have certain things that are culturally defined that we're like, you can do this, you can't do this. And in your exercise for this little section, I'm going to have you think through some things that for you are things that you can and can't do. But that's not all, or things that you can and cannot wear. I'm also going to have you think through animals that you can and cannot eat, or animals that are kind of creepy. So this is a picture of a jackalope, and jackalopes are not real, but they are a cross between a jackrabbit and an antelope, apparently. And they're often used in like horror movies to be like an omen of bad things is coming. So jackalopes, according to our modern culture, are creepy and weird. Also, you know something's wrong when you see a sharktopus. You should be like, that isn't right. These categories should not be brought together. A shark is a shark and an octopus is an octopus. And so if you see a sharktopus, you're going to be like, that isn't right. What I'm going to suggest to you is that the ancient Israelites had similar ideas about animals that were okay and animals that were not okay. Like, that's just creepy, weird, and wrong. And they had ideas about what clothes were okay and what clothes were not okay. So all of that kind of comes together to form this law code that they have. So one of the questions that often comes up is, why in the world are certain animals clean and other animals unclean? That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So why can't I eat a lobster? Lobsters are delicious. Why can't I enjoy bacon? Bacon is lovely, you know, so you're not allowed to eat a lobster and you're not allowed to eat pig. This is just so hard. This is difficult. This is weird. Why did they think this? And there are a variety of different responses to why the Israelite people disallowed eating these animals. But what I'm going to suggest to you is that they disallowed the eating of these animals because the animals that they weren't allowed to eat didn't fit nicely into any one of these containers that Yahweh made. You guys will remember the days of forming and the days of filling. And God creates spaces in those first 3 days of forming. And land animals belong to the land. They should only walk on the land, and sea animals belong in the sea. They're fish. Now, when you look at this lobster, it crawls along the ground like a land animal would, but it lives in the sea. And so it's crossing these categories of things that are okay, kind of like a sharktopus would. It's not fitting into the right categories, and so that's why the people saw it as unclean. It was a cultural thing rather than a moral thing. So we've also got pigs that are not clean to eat. You can't eat them. You can't sacrifice them. None of that. And that's because if an animal lives on the land, then they should have a cloven hoof and they should chew the cud. Those are animals that are safe, that are good, that are behaving the way they're supposed to. A pig doesn't chew the cud, and it's got a cloven hoof. And so what is this thing? It's kind of like a jackalope almost. We can't eat something that's like that. That's just disgusting. And so I think that these things are kind of culturally defined, that God really didn't care very much about pigs or about lobsters, but for the people who were living with God in their midst, they cared very deeply about that stuff. So that's the direction that I'm going to go. Now I'm going to have you take a minute and think through some categories for yourself. What is okay to wear? What is not okay to wear? And what is okay to eat? And what is not okay to eat? Because you probably have some too. And you may even think to yourself, somebody who wears that is not fit to talk to God. And I'm not talking about modesty things here. I'm talking about like somebody who wears socks with sandals. That's not right. Things of that nature. And you also might think to yourself, well, somebody who would eat that, ew, they shouldn't go anywhere near God because God is so perfect. And if somebody is willing to eat grapes with ketchup on them, then they're probably a jerk. My brother just posted on Facebook, anybody who eats ketchup on their tacos is so disrespectful. And you may have other things that you're not willing to eat. So I don't know if some of you would be willing to eat a cat or not, but why not? Is that culturally defined or is that morally defined? I'm going to let you decide in your discussion group right now.